the amount of garbage that ended up underneath Apollo 16 and 17, anybody can look at the photographs and look at them, right? They didn't move it too far. They picked it up, they redid the track, they changed the back of the set. They had to expand the set quite a bit to run around on the rover. When I look at some of the stuff, though, and how lazy they were in the detail and setup, it's almost like the landing sequence that they needed to film and photograph or an afterthought. I believe they spent so much of their time trying to get a Saturn V rocket off the ground without it blowing up. They would have been marshaling themselves and try and get the weight down on that vehicle just so they got 4 or 5 minutes of runtime on it.
Yep.
And just let it drop in the ocean. When I look at how they put together these sets and everything else, if they had time to do models, probably not likely. It's much easier, I think, in quite a few cases, just to jump on the vehicle and drive the rover. They certainly had the set. They probably would have looked at it, and they might have even tried it. And they might have used a combination of both.
Yeah, it's possible.
They would have tried every camera technique on their simulation things, their overhead to create their LRO photographs and stuff like that were all done. They had already had the maps of the lunar surface on the rover when they were practicing.
Yeah, of course they did. There are pictures of them referring to those maps.
Absolutely. And of course, the biggest mistake they made is setting up the stations and creating the cue cards.
Yeah.
Those are to practice with. You set the station up. There's the cue cards. These are the kind of rocks you're going to find. Here's how to describe the rocks. This is the type of mineral content in the rock. That's all in the cue cards. That's fine to practice with.
Yeah, of course it is.
But that's not what you're going to do when you go to the moon. There are no stations. You have no idea how to get to one spot to the other. You don't know if you can even travel across the surface. It doesn't take a very much little cut in a rock, 6-foot drop, and you can't cross it. Right? You can't jump up and down it. You can't drive the rover over it. You can't do anything. You might be restricted by the dust being kicked up that you can't travel very far at all before you just can't see where you're going. They don't know that. Well, they haven't been, so they don't know.
Interesting, I think it's one of the Russian missions onto the moon. And it is quite distinctly reported that a lot of the rocks that they encountered were very soft, and they crumbled when the craft, they were the unmanned lunokhod craft, they actually crumbled under that weight.
They're going to find out an awful lot of stuff.
Yeah, you are.
When you eventually get there.
Yep.
And somehow they're going to have to make all of this stuff disappear. It's going to have to turn into children's... Well, they're already turning it into children's stories. They're enticing children and programming them from birth into this. They get into, as soon as they get into school. If you look at some of the other countries, especially in South America, if you start searching for stuff on space travel and everything else, all you find are for public school age children up to 10 years old. That's what you find. They're all animations, they're all anything else. And if you want to download the stuff, if you happen to be a school teacher and you can sign up and show, you can download their little animations and stuff like that, right? You get little trailers online, and that's it if you want the entire teaching animations that they put up. That's in South America, and I was surprised. I was looking through there going, where is the stuff for adults? Where is the space programs for adults? Well, they don't have any for adults because they're just for children, and it's just animations.
Because adults know what's going on. They can see it.
I think programming the kids is probably the most devastating thing you can do, because if you teach them that this has happened and you show them so-called how it was done, and they have brilliant minds, and they say, well, it worked this way, they keep going back, well, it worked this way, it worked this way, they'll never be able to figure it out on their own.
No, there's no reason why they should. They haven't got the scientific knowledge to be able to do so.
Even if they were super intelligent, even if they had the scientific background, if you teach them the basis of science incorrectly, you've taken a brilliant mind and you've taken them so far off course, he'll never correct himself to come back to figure it out on his own. He'll be persuaded by other people. He'll be influenced to the point where nothing makes sense anymore, and he'll probably go off and do something else instead. I mean, we're still working with bloody missiles, cheap attack missiles. The end of World War II on, 100-year-old technology on how to get something off the ground. They work pretty good as missiles. If you want to attack something and put a weapon on board. I mean, Yvonne Braun didn't know anything about creating an environmental unit inside on the top of that missile to house and keep humans alive. He knew nothing of that. He knew how to build a rocket and get it off the ground. But he didn't know how to keep people alive inside of that thing.
No, it wasn't his job. His job was to send rockets over from Germany, parts of Holland, they launched them from, The Hague.
Right. And they didn't have to worry about heat or radiation or lack of oxygen or anything else. Just get there and let it blow up.
Yeah, or even re-entry. They just brought the thing down, cut the power off, and it'll land where it lands. Quite a lot of the information at the end of World War II about where the V-2 rockets landed was kept fairly secret, so that the Germans wouldn't know that they hadn't got it correct and landing way off course. I mean, some landed in London, but not all of them. There were 1,200 V-2 rockets launched towards London.
It was just hit and miss, wasn't it?
Oh, it was, yeah.
And if a little bit of headwind, then they have to calculate that in, and we need a little more today.
Yeah, which is why one of the major aspects of the war was the people working at Remenham, I think it was, in Berkshire, trying to calculate the launch site of the V-2 rockets. And they were doing it using radar, which has only just been invented, to determine the point of launch. And if they could do it fast enough, the RAF could get planes into the air to bomb that particular area, which is why the V-2 rockets were all mobile, so they could be moved. So once they'd launched, they'd immediately move the rest of the rockets into another site. So if the RAF came across to bomb them, which they did, and they managed to do it quite successfully, they finished up launching from forests and woodland, so they couldn't be seen so easily. But there were people in Holland who were observing the launches, because you couldn't avoid that, reporting across to London that a rocket had been launched. Then the radar would start to track it. They would then work back from the trajectory the rocket was on at that time. They could find the launch site. It was a very clever idea. They did it very well. But isn't it interesting that at the end of World War II, the major prize for both the Americans and the Russians were the scientists and the equipment from Peenemünde, which is where it was originally developed, into the mountainsides, the Harz Mountains, where they were manufacturing them.
Yeah.
And there were, 2,000 scientists taken across to Russia and 1,600 to America. It was a major prize because obviously America and Britain and France and all the rest of them knew the value of being able to build rockets. In the case of the V-2, they were carrying a ton of explosives on the front. Werner von Braun, to give him his due, did develop something which worked. I mean, this is what, 1944, 1945? Those rockets worked.
They did a devastating job, is what they did.
Yeah.
That's why they were looked at as a huge advancement in technology, to have that kind of a war machine happening there where you can remotely calculate where this thing's going to hit, and after a few tries you're going to be fairly close.
Oh yeah, you are.
Imagine when you hear NASA talking about old technology, when they're talking about Orion, and they go, oh well, we can't use anything from Apollo. It's old technology. Old technology you got to get rid of is the damn rocket itself.
Yeah, it worked.
That's the only piece they're hanging on to. They're talking about all the electronics and all of the other guidance systems and everything else. That's old technology. We can't do that.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the rocket themselves. And they're still trying to build a rocket.
The same as the V-2 rockets. I mean, it's using the same basic principles.
They're using the same fuel. They're using the same everything.
Yeah.
And they say, well, today's technology, we can't incorporate old technology with it. Right? Well, you're still trying to use 100-year-old rocket technology to go somewhere. We're saying it didn't work in 1969. So why are they still trying to use it?
They don't know any better.
It doesn't do anything for them. And that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks they have, is not developing a flying machine that is not only futuristic, but if you need to develop a pure anti-gravity machine, if you have something that can repel every force that's out there like a protective shield around it that stops radiation, the vacuum of space, it stops everything and protects the entire craft. It can't just do one thing, it's got to do more than what you see in Star Wars, right? Stop missiles from coming in, it's got to stop the radiation, it's got to be a different kind of protective shield, a barrier around that vehicle. It has to give the same environment that Earth naturally gives us.
Yeah, of course it does. And I told you about the lecture I went to, the British Interplanetary Society.
Yeah.
Lady from the Harwell Atomic Energy Research Centre near Oxford. And she said, we were trying to develop a system of electromagnetic protection.
Shielding.
Yeah. They said the electromagnetic energy had to be so powerful, it would harm the astronauts. So it was basically a non-starter. They were developing the wrong system.
The energy has to come from a remote source. It has to be large enough. The Earth is the only thing we know of that does all of those things.
Yeah, does it very well too.
And we can look around with our big telescopes and we don't see a reproduction of that anywhere.
No.
We are unique in that field. So what makes us think that we have the capabilities to reproduce it one more time? That makes it portable. We want to make a portable device of the same thing that we need, and we need all of it.
Yeah, we do. We can produce the electromagnetic energy around a small object, but you can't put a human in that same object. It would kill him.
Right.
Well, it's rather like putting your head into a microwave oven. Not very good for your head. Wouldn't have to last long.
If you're going to do space travel, it has to automatically regenerate and purify water, regenerate the oxygen that we breathe, automatically control the temperature for us. We already have all of that stuff happening here, right? The fact of the matter is we are traveling through space.
Yeah, we are.
We are on the best spacecraft ever built, and we just don't know enough to enjoy the ride.
And we can't build another one.
No, we can't build this. This is a unique thing. We don't appreciate it. We try and destroy it, and we got to stop doing that. And we certainly can't generate another one at any scale to travel on our own. What happens if you decide you're going to travel on your own? This cell that we're on is reliant on its orbit around that sun. If you think you can go out of the solar system with your own device, you've lost your energy source.
Yeah, you have.
They don't realize that humans have limits, and we are at a limit.
But Apollo was successful, wasn't it? We're told. We're being led to believe. And this same scientist who was talking about producing electromagnetic shields around a spacecraft, when I asked, I said, well, how did Apollo manage? He said, oh, it was the luck of Apollo. This Atomic Energy Research Center professor.
Yeah, luck of Apollo.
The luck of Apollo, which explains everything. If you've got luck with you, everything explained.
Yeah.
Dodging through radiation energies, dodging through gravity, surviving in the vacuum of space. That's the thing they're all stuck on. They can't get the re-entry to work.
Re-entry from low Earth orbit's a huge problem already.
Yeah, that is quite risky. And that's only 17,500 miles an hour. Really not very fast. You're coming back from the moon or anywhere outside the Earth's magnetosphere, you're coming back at 25,000 miles an hour. 50% increase in speed equals double the energy required to be dissipated. That's the inverse square law in action again.
Yeah, except when you fail to dissipate it, it then builds.
It builds.
When you can't stay up with it, it builds. Just like one little tile off the space shuttle. It doesn't dissipate it, it just holds the heat in that one spot and it just, boom, out it goes. Just cooks it. It only takes a few seconds.
It weakens the whole craft, and within literally a minute or so, it's disintegrating because it's got nothing to hold it together.
I think some of the problems, we should turn our focus back. If NASA would stop propagating this stuff and take the energy they have and take the educated people that they have and turn them back and start dealing with what we need to deal with on this planet. Because we need to control not only our population, but how much we destroy it. They need to start researching what the long-term effects of fracking for oil and propane and stuff like that. We need to correct what's going on in the oceans. We need to correct our climate. And we are infecting all of that. We don't understand the long-term effects.
This book is being reviewed in Nexus in the next issue, in the August-September issue.
Okay.
Or in North America, the September-October issue.
Okay.
By a very famous author.
Yes.
Two very famous authors. It summarizes the whole of this Apollo conundrum. How do you keep 400,000 people quiet? That's one of the questions you get quite often. 400,000 people work for Apollo. I think it was more than that. What a ridiculously stupid question. How do you keep 400,000 people from revealing this conspiracy? You don't keep them quiet because they don't know that it was faked.
Right. The rest of the country didn't know any better either.
No, of course they didn't. And they go around saying it was real. So look at the pictures. I said, we've looked at the pictures, haven't we? The pictures are faked. And the final nail in that coffin was the discovery that vacuum affects photographic film. Prove me wrong.
The vacuum would affect pretty much every material that they've ever tested in it. And they're only being able to test it, like at Sandusky, is only 10 to the minus 6. How do you certify a product if you cannot test it in the conditions it's going to be in? If you're going to go to the moon, you have to be able to pull a vacuum of 10 to the minus 12.
Yeah, at least 10 to the minus 12. And if you can't pull it...
And do it repeatedly. And have the people that are going to go there practice in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Get used to the suits they're going to be wearing. Get used to everything else. Nobody's ever walked into Sandusky, and that's like walking in a Mr. Turtle pool by comparison to walking on the moon. They can't do it. They can't even do 10 to the minus 6 with a spacesuit on at Sandusky. And that is fact. That keeps you within 130 miles off the surface.
And because they can't do the testing, they can't demonstrate that what they claim is correct. Because we could say, well, put an astronaut into a spacesuit, put him into a vacuum chamber at 2 or 10 to the minus 12, and let's see what happens. He'd die, because the suit wouldn't be able to stand it, even though it's only £5 per square inches. Quite a lot inside the spacesuit, and nothing outside pressing in. Nothing. It's a vacuum. They can't demonstrate that they can do it, which is probably why there is so much delay on launching any rocket, whether it's NASA, SpaceX, Blue Origin, any of these people, launching any rocket into that sort of environment. Because if it fails, and it almost certainly will if they haven't tested the structure of it, they're going to be in trouble. And they won't be able to do it. And Elon Musk will have to build his own vacuum chamber to test it all in.
I'm sure you could rent one from somebody.
I'm not sure if there are any around that work at that level of vacuum.
Not to put people in. You have stuff in electronics that can pull down in very, very tiny chambers when they're working on equipment like an electronic piece or whatever, or medical laboratories, and they try a few things, right? They can get up into like minus 7. Some are claiming a little higher than that, but at a very small scale, not for people.
Which indicates that none of the equipment was tested in the environment it was supposed to be going to, which indicates that it didn't happen.
Nor can it ever be.
Exactly. It can't ever happen, which is tragic in some ways, because many people around the world believe what we're told about Apollo until you start examining it, and then you find it was complete fabrication.
That reminds me of the rock box that they brought back and kept for 50 years that had the full vacuum. I mean, how absurd could you get? Aluminum case, holding the vacuum from the moon with the rocks in there for 50 years to open it up for the 50th anniversary. We cannot generate that kind of a vacuum to start with, nor can we build a container to keep it in.
No. Especially out of aluminium.
And then, because we know all of that, how can the rocks be genuine?
Oh, because they can compare them to the ones that Apollo brought back.
From the other fake ones they brought back that have no radioactive signature.
No, none at all. And they expect us to believe it. At least must be a conspiracy. Call it what you like. Let's just get the science behind it. If you apply science to this, of vacuum, of heat, of radiation, you apply the science, you'll soon find out it doesn't work. You'll soon find out Apollo couldn't possibly have happened the way we're told it did, because you didn't test it. None of it was tested.
Couldn't test it.
Couldn't test it. And as for Apollo 8, that was the biggest farce of them all. The rocket hadn't been tested, the heat shield hadn't been tested, the astronauts were going to an environment they'd never been to before, but they all come back alive. Well, they never went in the first place. Went into low Earth orbit, like all the others.
And very low.
But the NASA proponents will say you could see it. They don't know what they're talking about, these people. You couldn't see it unless you were looking into exactly the right place in the sky at exactly the right time, just after sunset, where the rays of the sun coming up would illuminate it going over, but only for 5 minutes. So you'd have to be looking in the right place for 5 minutes. Nobody was, because they didn't expect it, and they couldn't see it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, coming back in and not having any proper knowledge of the Van Allen belts or the radiation that they're going to encounter or the amount of heat that they're going to have on re-entry.
Yep.
And it all worked perfectly, and then they started to realize that if they were actually doing that, that it's going to be a huge problem.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden we go ahead 50 come odd years and there's Orion can't do it.
Yep.
Can't even do hardly 20,000 miles an hour, and it's burning up everywhere. And 10 years after that, they haven't been able to fix it.
No, they haven't. It's one and only flight.
And straight into the museum.
Yep. So now they're trying to work out how to get back again. It really is very sad. If NASA cling on to the myth of Apollo, that Apollo landed on the moon, which he didn't, if they cling on to that myth, they're never going to get anywhere. Because they're going to be using technology which doesn't work.
They have to start from scratch on everything.
Yeah. Start from first principles.
Even for unmanned stuff. Because all of those factors still apply, whether it's manned or unmanned. Any electronics they put out there is going to have to be protected from heat, radiation, everything else.
Yep.
They're not using photographic film, and they're not going to be using Mylar on anything, because Mylar and photographic, the S-Star film, are exactly the same material.
Yeah.
And we call it a different name because one's in a photograph and the other one's for camping.
It's sad watching it. The Space Launch System, they're doing a wet practice launch. They're going to load it up with all the fuel, and they're going to fire the engines to see if they work, and then shut it down again. It's not due to be launched until August. But it started life in 2004 as the Ares 5 rocket. That's 18 years ago. They haven't got it off the ground yet.
Let's have a look at this PDF file here. Here's what we want to look at right here. It says, before starting the engine, this is the descent stage of the LEM when they're in orbit. The propellants must be settled to the bottom of the tanks. Under weightless conditions, this requires an ullage maneuver. That is, the LEM must be moved in an X or upward direction to perform the maneuver. The astronaut or automatic guidance equipment operates the downward firing of the thrusters. So you use the thrusters to create a gravitational force to settle the fuel to the bottom of the tanks. Then you can light the main engine for descent. However, there is a problem with that. The retros are operating with the same fuel. And if you're weightless in gravity, how is that going to work? you could just be floating there and not be able to fire anything if the fuel must be settled in a condition before it can be fired. So how does anyone make a course correction if they claim that they're on their way to the moon? How do they get into orbit? How do they fire to start the descent to the lunar surface, right? If this fuel needs a gravitational force to settle it to the bottom of the tank, and that's what this document is stating, that the hypergolic fuel needs to be settled to the bottom of the tank before you can fire the engine. That not only applies to Apollo, but it applies to all other flights that are using this hypergolic fuel.